Good morning, everybody. Martin Root with Project Heaven on Earth. And as many of you know, I get a Google alert every day that alerts me to people and books and websites around the world that are dealing with heaven on earth. And that's how I found this morning's guest, David Essel, who wrote a book called How to Experience Heaven on Earth, a life-changing story for today. Welcome, David.
Hey, Martin, great to be with you. And like minds are attracted to each other.
I think so, David. Tell me, first of all, a little bit about your background before we get into the book.
Yeah, well, I'm 40 years now in the world of personal growth. I started out in sports psychology. 30 years ago, I transferred into what we call the general population of counseling and coaching, and radio, TV host for 28 years, and author of now 10 books. The last 4 have been #1 bestsellers, including the one that we're discussing right here, How to Experience Heaven on Earth, which was an absolute gift to me. There's no way to say it. It was just handed to me.
Well, good. Let's go right into that then. Tell me about how it was handed to you and the story about how that happened.
Yeah, around the year 2000, I had really strongly considered going into a monastery to become a monk. There's only one remaining monastery in the state of Florida. It's called St. Leo's Abbey by Tampa, Florida. So I went there and spent 4 days there, talked to the monks about, my desire to possibly join and what would it take. And, I met this guy, 72 years old, one of the monks there, 72 years old. And I was sitting there talking to him about, my desire to do this. And he looked at me and he said, "Are you sure you're not too young?" I said, "To enter the monastery?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "What are you talking about? I thought people did it at 18 and 20 and 22. He goes, "I'm 71, 72. He said, "I joined at 69, 2 years after my wife died. And I told her that if she died before me, I would become a monk." And he said, "It's been 3 years." And he said, "It's heaven on earth." He said, I just love it. So I walked away from that, Martin, going, oh my gosh, maybe I don't have to rush that whole concept of becoming a monk. Maybe I still have work to do. And here's the most ironic thing that happened after that. Within a couple days of coming back from the monastery, when I'd wake up in the morning to journal, there was a voice in my head. And the voice called themselves the young monk. And it was kind of like this funny little, where's that voice coming from? And I was asked to write. That's all I was asked to do. So he wrote the story. I wrote it, but it was given to me or channeled through me about a young monk that goes into the monastery to try to experience this thing called heaven and to prepare himself for when he walks through the pearly gates or whatever happens after this world. And what he realized after a very short period of time was that he was depressed, he was in pain, that all of the joy he was expecting wasn't in the monastery, that he could see that there was still drama and chaos and interpersonal relationships. And this old wise sage came to him when he was meditating by the river, and he said to him, "You have asked no one for help, and yet your mind is struggling just like that brook in front of you. As you walked with your head down to your meditation space, I could feel the mind totally out of alignment with what you came here for. You're here to ask for help. When you choose to do that, your life will radically change." And I'm getting chills right now, Martin, because at that moment, the young monk's mind opened and blossomed, that he could experience the heaven that he thought he was waiting for on the other side here, if he just had a wise sage to lead him along the way. And every experience in the book is the young monk, and the young monk happened to be the town counselor, because every monk in a monastery has a role to play. Some in the monastery that I went to, there were some that cut, the monks' hairs once a month. There was another one that took care of the grounds, another one that was an accountant, and then there was another one that went out into the community to offer support, counseling support, grief support, whatever was needed. So in the book, How to Experience Heaven on Earth, the young monk goes into the role of being the counselor for the people in the town. And all these people were coming in with really tough, difficult situations. And he was able to show them that in their experience of pain, that there would be light, that there would be something amazing to look at if they could change their perspective. And Martin, that's the whole concept of the book. Heaven is here. It is here now. It is also on the other side, so many people have told us, but we're missing the boat. And as a matter of fact, when I finished writing the book, one of my assistants said, "Do you know how many people I talk to every day that are waiting for heaven? like they're missing the boat. It's here. It's in the laughter of a child. It's the kiss from your dog. It's the hug from your partner. It's the movie that brings tears. It's the sunrise that explodes your mind with the glory of God on earth. It's every moment of our life could be experienced as heaven. And that was the purpose of the book.
So let me go to this point, because I've heard this. I've been saying the same thing, David. I want to drill down with this. Where does the belief that this is not heaven come from? When I began my book, Project Heaven on Earth, I asked the same question of people: where's heaven? Where's heaven? And it's always after death, up there. But the basis of all of that is not here, not now. Where does that, what I call misbelief, come from?
I think it's religion. I really do. I don't know what other answer. I mean, I like my parents. I was raised Catholic, Roman Catholic. I became an all-faith minister because, after a period of time, I realized I did not want division in my life. I wanted inclusion. And so as an all-faith minister, I studied every religion in the world to be able to understand a little bit more deeply what it means to be Jewish, or what it means to be Hindu, or what it means to be Buddhist, or what it means to be anything. And what I see in that almost all of these teachings is that it's the afterlife we're shooting for. It's be good here now so that afterlife you get the rewards, And so I believe, Martin, I could be incorrect, but from my experience, I've seen it happen through the religious doctrines that we're waiting for something, we're working for something. And it just didn't make sense to me, quite frankly. I felt that there was a missing piece. So when you bite into the ripest strawberry of all time, if you're in the moment, present in the moment, that strawberry is going to explode in your mouth if you're in the moment. But if you're eating a strawberry while you're driving your car, you're going to miss heaven. if you're going to miss it. It was right there.
I love this. I've never heard that line. If you're not present, you're going to miss the heaven that's here. David, that's a wonderful way of saying it. You and I have been working unbeknownst to each other until this interview on the same issue. And I believe that this notion of heaven here now is what's beginning to arise as humanity evolves into its next stage of evolution. So I'm deeply thankful to you. Now, one of the interviews I heard you say as well, that what about all the turmoil in the world today? What the evil, the suffering. Let me go right at that. How can you say? Because I'm asked the same question, so it's a delight for me to throw it back to you, David. Look at all the turmoil. Look at the political instability. Look at this country, that country, the opioid crisis, and so on and so on. How can you say this is heaven on earth with that stuff present?
In the book, How to Experience Heaven on Earth, there's a story about a young actress that was a favorite of the monks, and she was on her way to become really a star. She was working as a waitress during the day to make money to pay rent, but every evening, every weekend, she was out performing at plays anywhere she could, and she had understudies. She was grooming these younger people than her to be able to come up and eventually to take her position. And one day she was murdered in her apartment. And so the young monk struggled with, how could this happen? Where is the heaven in this experience? Where is it? And after I tell you this story, I'm going to tell you another one that is absolutely as mind-blowing. And the sage came to him and said this. He said, in the passing is pain. Do not run from that pain. In the passing is turmoil. Do not run from that turmoil. For when you move through the pain and turmoil, you will see what I'm about to tell you is true. Her passing was the gateway for her understudies to experience success at an earlier level and a more profound level than they maybe ever thought was possible. She's prepared them to take over her position. She has actually opened the doorway for her students by her passing through. So where the pain and turmoil is, don't run, but also look at the experience now, that she's groomed these people to take her position, which could be looked at as an opportunity to experience heaven on earth.
Very beautiful, David. Before you get into the second story, one of the things that I say in my book is part of co-creating heaven on earth is to look at the hells on earth and to clean those up. And what you're saying the same thing. Don't run from that. It is present. It is for us to be present with it. That's the way we have agency.
Yeah, it really is. And, we have so many, myself included, in the past, I struggled. I was an alcoholic and a cocaine addict for years, and it was all about avoiding. Martin, I wanted to avoid. And now what I do is I welcome, my dog, Saint, 13 years of age, about 10 weeks ago passed. I was doing an interview with, just like this. I was doing an interview. I was sitting here. Saint was a Italian Greyhound. He had been brutally abused when I got him, and so it took several years for him to trust me, and we formed a bond, Martin, that was unbelievable. I'm on the radio, he's sitting next to me in a chair, and all of a sudden we hear this outrageous shriek. It's something I had never heard before. It was horrendous, and the host said to me, "Oh my God, David, what was that?" And I go, "I don't know." Just as I said that, I turned and I saw Saint's head hit the floor. He had had a massive heart attack, and I jumped up. I was still on the call, which I didn't even think about. I grabbed him, I picked him up, and I was begging him, "Please stay. Saint, do not leave me." And I performed CPR right on the spot, Martin. My assistant, Mary Lou, did mouth to mouth. We brought him back for about 2 seconds, and then he went again, and we could never get him back. That immense pain, I can't even tell you how much pain that was.
Yes.
And it's only been 10 weeks. And last week on an interview, I was sharing this very story, and I broke down again. So if that happens, that happens. But, one of the things that
Just take a moment.
One of the things that I look at that was heaven on earth in that experience was he allowed me to be there, to do something, to try. That is a gift. I didn't come home to him on the floor and he died by himself.
Thank you, David.
The ultimate gift, I think, was that he waited.
Yes.
And he allowed me to try to do the best I could to bring him back, and so the tears I'm feeling right now are very mixed. They're very sad, but, I believe that that's an experience of heaven, that we have someone, it could be a pet, it could be a family member, a best friend, and we are there when they pass. It is, Ram Dass, one of the most beautiful teachers in the world on the concept of death and passing over. He spent most of his life working in this arena. And he says it is the gift of the living before they pass to have people go with them on that journey, so to speak, And so, because of that teaching that I received years ago from Ram Dass, I was able, after a couple weeks, it was not instantaneous. And I don't want anyone who has recently gone through a loss feel guilt or shame that they should be experiencing heaven right now, because everyone's timeline is different. Healing
Correct.
is not linear,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
There's no linearness to healing. So you take your time but there will come a day, if you do your work, where that you'll go, my God, what a gift. What a gift that he came into my life. What a gift that he left with me there. I mean, that's the kind of messages that sometimes people can't see the beauty in that until they really slow down and hear it from you, Martin, hear it from me. And maybe it's a third or fourth or fifth teacher they hear it from, that all of a sudden it'll snap and say, oh, yes, that could be heaven too.
David, thank you for sharing so deeply and authentically. And I think that adds a dimension of realism to heaven on earth. It's not woo-woo heaven on earth. It's a real authentic, spiritual, divine presence that we're talking about here. You have a number of different chapters. I mean, you talk about forgiveness. Just if you could touch briefly on other ways that people can come into the experience of heaven on earth now.
You know what? Could I read a page and a half?
Sure.
Is that good? Okay, because this is the very end of the book, and the young monk had become an old monk, and he was retiring. And when he retires from the monastery, he goes into seclusion. And so he had just spent a whole day with the new young monks that had come in. And, he had said to them throughout his teachings, this was his final teachings to the monk, that, you guys have way too much energy for me. He said, I've done this for so long. Now it's time for you. And then he walks to his favorite place, a stream, to meditate after this all-day event that he had just led. And he says, he thought of a favorite saying as he walked to the stream he had heard years ago: dance like nobody is watching, and how important that was for everyone to do, so that we may feel the true hidden spirit that resides within, the spirit that wants to come out and play, the spirit that is full of compassion, tolerance, and love. He had now reached his clearing by the water, removed his robe, and sat to commune with nature, with God. After an hour of deep meditation, he stood to leave. He looked across the meadow just in time to see several deer snacking on the wildflowers, which were in full bloom. Quote, "Could there be more to life than this?" he wondered with a smile. "Well, yes, as a matter of fact, there is," came a voice from behind him. The young monk almost jumped out of his skin at the sound of another voice in the woods. He turned to see the old monk laughing hysterically, sitting just 5 feet behind him. "Brother Francis," the young monk screamed, "my lord, you have the knack of doing what no one else can. How in the world do you think I'll make it to my next birthday when you sneak up behind me and scare me like this?" Both men looked at each other for a brief moment and then started laughing in unison. "My son, I was with you for your entire walk today. I twisted and danced with you as your outstretched arms were raised in praise of God. I was centered with you in the depth of meditation. I smelled the apples and watched the deer at the very moment you did." The young monk was baffled. Years ago, at the same place, the old monk had appeared, teaching him the most important lesson he had ever learned: to be free of our fears, our frustrations, our lack. We need to be willing to reach out and help anyone at any time. And we also must be willing to reach out and ask for the help we need in this ever-changing and challenging dance called life. There is more to life at this very moment if you desire it to be so. The constant state of bliss is available for those willing to go to a place of incessant prayer, of nonstop gratitude for each moment, for every breath they breathe. For there is really nothing to fear, nothing at all, once we realize we are never alone. Heaven on earth is available to all who finally realize that step by step, the Lord is walking with us, behind us, and in front of us. The Lord is always here, though he may take on a variety of shapes and forms that are not always expected. As he does, each one is meant to teach us about love. As his voice began to trail away, the young monk turned to thank his wise sage. Yet he was gone. In his place, just 8 inches from his face, stood a young deer. As their eyes connected, the deer stepped closer. Almost nose to nose, tears of joy streamed down the young monk's face. "This, my lord, is heaven on earth. You do bless me indeed." At that moment, the deer took one more step forward. A tear dropped from her eye as she reached to touch the young monk's nose with hers. The monk saw for the first time the face of God. Enlightenment had occurred in the unlikeliest of places, as so often it does. Slow down and let faith settle your soul and bring you home, home to yourself, heaven on earth.
Nothing to add, David. Nothing to add. Thank you. Thank you for your partnership in helping co-create Heaven on Earth. Thank you for bringing this message in the world. Thank you for being an agent of Heaven on Earth. And may blessings continue to rain on you, and may you continue blessing the world. Thank you for this interview.
Martin, I had an amazing time with you. I appreciate your energy, love, and passion as well.